My group is doing a corporation, and the definition of a corporation is a legal entity created by the state whose assets and liabilities are different from the owner. And because the assets and liabilities are different from the owner, they get taxed differently also. And because the corporation is a legal entity, it has rights, duties, and powers, such as the right to own, transfer, and receive property. So when creating a corporation, the corporation is created by incorporators, and incorporators are people who create the corporation. And each state has a specific procedure called chartering the corporation for incorporating a business. And so one of the procedures that most states have to have is they require a minimum of 3 incorporators, and that's how small businesses can be incorporated and are incorporated. And so another one of those procedures is that the companies can't have the same name or even similar names. So like Apple can't be similar to, or a company can't be similar to Apple as the name. And so then there are legal documents called articles of incorporation, and that is what incorporators must file. And the articles of incorporation contain the basic information about a business, like the name and address of the corporation, the name and address of the incorporators, and the objective of a corporation. Those are just 3 out of 10 from some of the Model Business Corporation Act. And so then based on the articles of incorporation, the state will issue a corporate charter to the company. And then after the company gets the charter, the owners will establish the corporation's bylaws, and they'll elect a board of directors. And then now Riley will talk about the different types of a corporation and give some examples.
There are 5 different types of corporations. The first being a private corporation, which is a business that is owned by 1 or fewer people, usually owned by a family, and is very closely managed by the people who own the company. An example of this is a Publix, which is actually the largest private corporation in the nation. The second is a public corporation, which is a corporation in which the stock can be bought or sold by anyone at any time, and these types of corporations usually have high influence on consumers. And examples of this would be IBM and McDonald's and Caterpillar. The third is an IPO, which stands for Initial Public Offering. This is usually a private corporation that needs financial aid to expand, so they become a public company to take advantage of all the funding that comes with that. And examples of this is Adolf Coors Inc., which is an old brewing company that had to go through this. The fourth is a Casey Public Corporation, which is a corporation owned by a federal, state, or local government. Its concerns are helping the citizens, like a mail service would be an example of this, like the things they're trying to do. But an example of this company would be something like NASA. The final one is a nonprofit or corporation, which is also a type of public corporation. Their focus is to offer a service but not make any profit in return. Any profits made will be donated to a different organization or put back into something else that is not this organization. And they get their funding from usually donations is how they get their funding. And whenever they get their profit, they donate it all to some charity or other organizations that need it. Examples of these would be the Red Cross, the American Lung Association, and something more like a private foundation would be there's something called the Daniels Fund.
Okay, moving on to ownership structure. So assets and liabilities are separate from the owners. The owners don't own them. It's part of the corporation. The corporation, the whole, owns them, not the owners themselves. And stockholders are individuals or groups of people that own shares or part of the company or the corporation. And these stockholders elect a board of directors, and the board of directors make sure things get done right in the business. They control everything. They watch over everything, make sure things are getting done right, all the good stuff. Then moving on to taxation. So in the United States, they have to pay a tax rate of 21%. And global companies usually have to pay, U.S. tax rate, but also foreign taxes if they're doing anything overseas, which can add up pretty quickly. Dividends are taxed twice: when first paid out to a stockholder, and then second, when the stockholder, it's counted as their income, the person's income. So that's twice when it's taxed, which is a big no-no. That's a downside of corporations. Moving on to liability. Stockholders are not responsible for a corporation's debt if it ends up failing, which is a good thing. It's a good thing that no personal income will be affected that's not already put into the business as a stockholder. And last, for this section is how profits are shared, and stockholders get all profits left after the corporation has paid off everything else with the business, and these are called dividends when the stockholders are being given back money that they've invested in and has turned into profits.
So moving on to the advantages and disadvantages of a corporation, some of the advantages are limited liability, because the resources are separate from the owners, and the stockholders are usually not held accountable for the failure of the company. And also, it's easy to transfer ownership from stockholder to stockholder. They can sell and trade based on how they want to do that. It's pretty easy to get funding for corporations, and they'll usually last a long time, or at least until the owners sell it. And it's also really easy to expand a corporation, like internationally or nationally. But some disadvantages are double taxation, because corporations get taxed in the United States and outside of the United States. So a corporation like Apple gets taxed in America, and then whatever foreign country they're getting taxed in, or they're selling their products. And also, forming a corporation could be fairly expensive. You have to pay for attorneys and legal fees and filing fees also, which could add up to a lot of money. And then the disclosure of information. Most information has to be made very public to all your shareholders to make sure they know what they're investing in. And then also, the final thing is employee-owner separation. Most employees feel like they're only working for their boss, and they don't feel like they belong in the company, or they don't see their self-worth. So they establish employee stock ownership fund or plans for the employees, so they have a share in their own company that they're working for.